Cheers and happy Wednesday. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Point Spread presented by BetFred Sports. I'm Travis Justice. This is, as Dr. Rob Zatechka likes to say, the best college football show you probably never heard of on YouTube, but the more you watch it, the more you're going to go, you know what? I need to tune in each and every Wednesday. It is a live call-in show, so if you want to participate, all you have to do is call 402-543-5556. That's 402-543-5556. If you don't want to call in, there are other ways to interact with us. You can use, boy, my son just cracked a beer. That was really loud. You can interact with us on Facebook and just use the comment section. Or if you're watching on YouTube, you can also just use the comment section on YouTube. You heard the guys laughing, so let's go ahead and bring him in right now. Scott Spreitzer, who's right over to my left. And at the bottom of the screen is your friendly neighborhood doctor, Dr. Rob Zatechka.
That might have been me.
That was you?
That might have been me.
That was
Sorry.
weird. Because
I thought I was still on mute.
It sounded like it was in this room. That was bizarre. I have really good headphones in, is what it is.
It's either that or it's the speaker setup you have me on right now.
So you're drinking a beer, I'm drinking a bourbon, and Scott Spreitzer drinking a what?
Drinking a Coke Zero.
Which might be the least healthy of the
yes,
the three of us.
You know, it not only sounded like it was in your studio there, Travis, but I was starting to wonder if my dog finally figured out how to pop a cold one. That's how loud it was in my home office here.
I mean,
wow.
That was like just a crisp, clean, open, Rob. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I don't. It's an Empyrean Brewing, so I don't.
What are you drinking? Are you drinking an IPA? Are you drinking a stout? What are you drinking?
This would be their Mind Over Mango IPA.
Ooh, that's
a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's
a pretty good one.
That sounds pretty good. Hey, before we get started, you see Scott Spreitzer with us. Of course, if you like what you hear from Scott Spreitzer, you want to work with Scott Spreitzer, text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 and get a free $60 trial of premium member picks from Scott. Or you can visit DocSports.com and sign up for the free 60 on the upper left hand of the website. BetFred has some bonuses for you this week. Check out the Pro Football bonus. Place a game day wager on any Pro Football first touchdown score, and you'll get paid out 2 times the odds in cash if your bet wins and the player scores a second touchdown. Use the promo code SCORE. That's for the Pro Football bonus. How about a parlay bonus for you? When you place 9 football parlays, the 10th parlay is on Fred, and you can get rewarded with up to a $100 Fred bet each week of the pro football season. Just use the promo code parlay. Scott, are you a parlay guy? You big parlay guy?
I can't remember the last time I played a parlay, but some guys like it. You know what I say all the time? Listen, if you're looking to do this on a professional or semi-professional basis, you don't really play parlays. But if you're looking to have fun, entertainment, $20 here, $10 there, fire away, man. Have fun. Make the game even more fun than it actually is. It's already a good time. And so I've got no problem with people who like to do that stuff. I'll play some teasers, 6-point teasers in the NFL. Don't tease college. That's a golden no-no. But when it comes to the NFL, I'm all over the – by the way, I got to say something real quick here before we move on. I want to know who that guy is under my name in that still photo that you showed that has brown hair. That's pretty impressive.
Well, if you would update your headshot from the internet, we'd be able to get a new one. I'm just trying to make you look younger, man.
Oh, I appreciate it. I got to get a new picture taken, maybe, but it's better than the one they use in Phoenix. I do a show in Phoenix on Fridays, and the guys use one from about 2006, and I look like I'm getting ready to shoot Zoolander Part 2, the Ben Stiller part. It's like scary as it gets. Blonde hair, looks like I was frosting and I wasn't. Light blue shirt, had hair, the whole shebang. 6'1", 190. Now I've shrunk. I'm 6 foot, but I'm about 225.
Hey, you said something before we get started. I do want to bring this up. You said doing teasers in college is a big no-no. Explain why. First of all, for somebody who may not know, explain what a teaser is, and then why you don't do it in college football.
Yeah, you could play 7-point teasers, 6-point teasers, some places 10-point teasers, things like that. And then, of course, the money you got to plunk down in order to win those teasers changes with whatever the amount of points you're using in that teaser. So for me, in the NFL, I probably play, I'm going to say I'd say maybe 2 teasers every couple of weeks. 6-point teasers is what I do. And I'll explain, first of all, a teaser, like I'll take maybe a couple of favorites that are maybe a 6 or 7-point favorite, tease them down to pick or 1 and tie them together. And I only play 2-team teasers. I don't play anything more than a 2-team NFL teaser. College football, the reason you don't play teasers is because if you go back over the last 30 plus years, you're going to see that the average final score is over 12 points away from the spread on average. And so it just makes no sense at all to jump and play on college football or even college basketball teasers, because just that final score on average over the long haul, over 30 years now, is that far off in college football, over 12 points. NFL, it's about 8 points over the last 30 years away from the spread, which makes it a little bit more reasonable to play teasers. But I hear, I watch these shows on like network TV, and there's a certain gambling show on ESPN, and they say things like, oh, the Niners are laying, 16 over so-and-so, and I'm going to take so-and-so and tease it up to 22. Absolutely ridiculous. And that's a good litmus test for asking people if they're really into betting, because if you're really into betting, you know that in the NFL, you tease pick up to 6 or 6 to pick, or you tease off of 1 point or up to maybe 2 points. You don't tease up anything more than from 2 up to 8 or anything higher. Like you don't tease a favorite of more than 8 down, because you're talking about getting that key number of 3 and things like that. So it's kind of funny when I watch some of these programs on TV and everybody's into gambling now. Oh, it's a thing to do. And then somebody will say, I've got a 2-team team, and it's way out of the parameters of what they should be betting. And right then I'm like, okay, he's a sports anchor. He's never been a bettor in his life.
See, you should write a book where it has like the, you could be like an offensive coordinator where they look down and say, okay, here's my cheat sheet. Is that if it's this, that you'd probably make a lot of money using that.
It's not a bad idea. Do I have to share it now?
No. Well, you just got to give me some royalties since it was my idea, right?
There you go.
Each and every week we've been doing a college football metric and something to look at during a game that gamblers like Scott will look at, and handicappers and stuff like that. And there's so many different metrics out there. And Scott, we're taking a look at a unique one tonight: rushing rate or yards over expectancy.
Yeah, basically. And by the way, these are like serious metrics that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. And I think next week I'm going to come back with something that's not only real easy to understand, but real easy to follow on a week-to-week basis. But for now, we're going to keep it at a calculus level. But rushing rate or yards over expectancy, the metric really does indicate how many extra yards a rusher gained or lost over or under those he actually rushed for. So an example would be, if a player ran for 100 yards and his rushing yards over expectancy was 90, he outperformed that rushing yards over expectancy by 10 yards. And it's not just like, let's say, a running back averages 90 yards per game rushing, and now he rushes for 100. So he went over that expectancy rate. It does factor that into the equation. It also factors defensive stats against the run into the equation before you go into the game. And finally, the final thing is that you also factor in when he ran for that yardage. Was it, 3rd and 15 and he gained 8 yards with a minute to go in the game, and his team was, running out the clock because they were up 7, or, the team had no chance and to come back and he got a handoff late in the game. So that all goes into the mix. Now, to take this one step further and how you can use this is an underdog with a high rush rate over expectancy, a team getting points, is if their percentage goes over that rushing yards over expectancy by a certain amount of yardage, and they're going up against a team that's favored against them who has below average rushing stats defensively, then what happens is you've got an underdog that may be able to control the tempo quite a bit in that game. You might have a 7-point underdog, and all of a sudden you want to jump on that team because they fit the parameters of this metric, and they're able to keep that ball and keep that opposing offense off the field. And on the flip side of that, if you got a favorite who's top 30 with a rushing rate over expectancy against an underdog with a strong defensive rush number, that means that favorite might have to change things up they do if they're heavily dependent on the run. They might have to change things. They might have to throw the football more. They might not be able to get those yardage they normally do because the underdog has such strong defensive numbers. And so you're able to look at an underdog in that case again. of all the metrics we've talked about, maybe I should look at this more, but I probably use this the least out of everything we've talked about thus far. But it does, you know what it does for me? And it doesn't create a whole lot of bets for me as far as the underdogs are concerned. It keeps me off of favorites that you're paying a premium to lay. If a team should be a 6-point favorite and they're laying 8.5, I might not play the underdog, but it's going to keep me off that favorite. And it saves you from losing some money throughout the course of the season.
Rob, you're geeking out at this, man. I know you are. I know you're geeking out on this stat.
Well, the thing is, I'm looking at it. It seems like, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm not a big gambler, but it seems like a very after the fact stat. Does that make sense when I say that? I mean, it seems like a past performance kind of thing.
More than any other metric we've talked about. It definitely is. I'll tell you, and that's why I don't use this as much as the others. It may, again, keep me off a favorite that maybe shouldn't be laying as many points as they are because they might have to adjust their offensive game plan that they don't normally have to adjust, or the underdog might be in a situation where they can control the tempo more. I'll give you a really good example, and I think, Rob, this is hitting on exactly what you're saying, and I'm going to use baseball for an example. The network showed a stat last week going into the wild card games where if a team in a game out-homered their opponent in that game, they were 123-33 since 2018 in the playoffs. So then the question is, okay, well, how do you predict that that's going to happen, or how do you factor that into your handicapping for an upcoming game? It's something that already happened. And the best way I can say on something like that, as an example, is that you look if that team, if one team has 240 homers on the season, the other team has 150, okay, check mark number one. Now let's look at the pitchers. If the team that hits all the homers goes up against a pitcher with a high home run rate, well, there's your second check mark, and you can take a chance at playing on that team, and you usually do it very well. But again, there's so much, past info, so to speak, that it becomes a little bit tougher to predict. That's why I use this the least amount of all the metrics that we've talked about thus far. And I hope I said that clearly enough to where it's, people can understand who are watching this.
Well, it's pretty much went over my head because I'm not a mathematician. I'm not very smart. Rob's smart. He understood right away. It's kind of like a pass thing. But we were talking before we went on the air. Tom Osborne would have loved this stat, right? You were talking about how Tom Osborne would have loved, not for gambling purposes, but would have measured something like that.
Well, I think he would have. I mean, but he had all of these breakdowns that went into how he kind of game planned. I mean, the whole game plan, what plays he was going to use, was all based around this kind of statistical analysis. And I mean, when I look at this one, I mean, the thing that I look at is that it looks like the value is where you've got, like, I guess I'd call it a big differential against teams. If you've got two teams that seem like one's by far and away the favorite, that you use this kind of stat, like you said, because you're looking for that value in bets. And if you've got a team that's kind of a decided favorite, but maybe you don't want to put money on that favorite. I mean, what's the underdog able to do when it comes to stopping the rush?
Sure.
So it makes sense to me in that regard. I just, like, at first glance when I looked at it, though, it looks like one of these stats that it's like, okay, this seems very past performance oriented, and I get that obviously has to play into this, but it's kind of that real time as you're watching a game. This isn't the kind of stat that you'd be sitting there looking at a game going, okay, is this the kind of thing that I can evaluate in real time if I made the right bet or not?
Yeah, the one thing you could do with this, and not that I'm saying that I do it, but it was kind of funny as you were talking, I was thinking about it, is that let's say you do have an underdog that you've projected to potentially, if they do things the right way that they've been doing all season, that they can control the tempo of a game with their running game and cover that number because the other team's not going to have their offense on the field as much as that team is used to. And then you're watching the game and you realize, wow, those stats on that underdog, the rushing stats, the rushing rate over expectancy isn't quite working in this game. You can live bet, a little bit on that favorite if things aren't going that way. So that's kind of just something I was thinking about as you were making your point, which was a good point. I think you can live bet this a little bit.
Eric writes in and says, hey, I had parent-teacher conferences, got me a little late to the party. Priorities, fellas. Now let's win some money. Man, don't go to parent-teacher conferences. I never went to a parent-teacher conference, ever. Here's what I did with parent-teacher conference. I think it's a basic one. I went to the teachers. I said, if you have a problem, call me. Otherwise, you don't want me to come to parent-teacher conferences because that's taking up much of your time and it's taking up much of my time. So you just go ahead and do whatever you need. So
I stopped going years ago. And what happened, not just because she got older, but I think I went once or twice. And I remember my daughter was like in the 5th grade, which out here, I believe it's that way back there too. Middle school starts in 6th grade out here, not like when I grew up, but it was 7 through 9. And so I went to her 5th grade, whatever, parent teacher conference. And I'm sitting there talking to her teacher, which we actually became friends with the teacher and her husband. But she goes, "What do you do for a living?" I mean, this is the first question. I'm in the sports betting industry. Why? "I saw you on TV the other night talking about a college basketball game, blah, 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 blah." And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm telling my husband, his kid's in my class. And so that was the last time I went.
Well, see, now the thing that happens at parent-teacher conferences is, hey, the parent goes to the teacher, "I saw you on OnlyFans the other night."
Yeah, the parent says to the teacher. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Rob. Sorry. Didn't mean to go that way.
This is the guy who does his betting at a strip club in Iowa. So take it for what it's worth.
That's fair. All right, here's tonight's games. We're going to take a look at 4 of them on the docket for you. Iowa State taking on Cincinnati in a Big 12 matchup, an undefeated matchup in the Pac-12. That's a rarity, by the way, in the Pac-12. Doesn't happen that often. Oregon is at Washington. Huge game for SC and Notre Dame. Notre Dame trying to bounce back. Another just brutal part of that Notre Dame schedule. And then we're going to wrap it up with the Iowa-Wisconsin game. The winner of this game probably going to be in the driver's seat, should we say, for the Big Ten West Division. If you have any questions for Scott Spreitzer, Dr. Rob Zatechka, or even myself, not that I have a lot to add, 402-543-5556. Again, 402-543-5556. Scott, our first game up, Iowa State, coming off a nice win against TCU, going to Cincinnati, an 11 o'clock game on FS1. Cincinnati, a 5-point favorite. You're over under at 44.5.
Yeah, both teams top 50 as far as everybody's power ratings are concerned. They're not in the top 40, but they're in that 41 to 49 range. The difference is that Cincy has improved their power rating numbers by a couple of points since the start of the season, and Iowa State has dropped in the power ratings a little bit since the start of the season, even with last week's win against TCU as a 6.5-point dog. And it was kind of a misleading final. I mean, they were outgained by nearly 50 yards, Iowa State, but they were +4 in turnovers. And one of the metrics we talked about was the turnover situation. But it's not just turnovers. I mean, 3 of their turnovers, TCU, came at the Iowa State 4, the Iowa State 17, and the Iowa State 22. It's a little bit difficult to overcome when you're getting that far down the field and you're not punching it in or at least kicking a field goal. So I look at Cincy. I like this kid, Emory Jones, for the most part. He's not bad. He's not doing what Desmond Ridder did when he was in college, but, a little over 62% passer. He's got 10 touchdowns, 6 picks. But this team can run, and they bring 3 running backs plus Jones, who all bring that running ability into the mix for this team. They all rush between 135 and 405 yards so far on the season. All 4 average more than 5 yards per pop, 2 of them over 5 yards per carry. Cincy's 10th in the nation. And you guys know by now, I love 2-to-1 rush angles. And Cincy's 10th in the nation at 220 yards rushing per game. Their defense is top 10, allowing 100 yards rushing per game. So we got that better than 2-to-1 ratio since he's rushing yardage gained as opposed to allowed. They're also 11th in total yards per game. So I think ISU is going to have their work cut out for them here. I mean, their offense is terrible. They can't run. They can't pass. 117th in total yards per game. This line has gone from 3.5 to 5. So, you're not getting any great value here, but I still think Cincy wins this by at least 10. And I don't want to badmouth Iowa State too much because I know somebody on the show who's now 7-0 on the season and had Iowa State last week. So nice call.
I got the Iowa State flag right behind me, right?
There you go.
Iowa and Iowa State won me money last week, and I'm 7-0 on the season. I don't bet every week. I said, as I've mentioned before, I look for value. Games that intrigue me. I took Iowa in the points last week. I took Iowa State as an underdog at home.
Are you betting on this one?
No, I'm probably going to lay off this one. It's more, I don't see the value yet for me, because I don't know what Iowa State, if I knew that Iowa State was going to force 4 turnovers, here's why I bet Iowa State last week. It was a night game. It was the Jack Trice celebration. You had all the old coaches in town. It was a big game with a lot of atmosphere. And I just felt Iowa State takes that Hilton magic for the basketball court and moves over to Jack Trice Field. That just felt
it was
right
an emotion. It was an emotionally based.
Yes.
Or an emotional foundation for the bet.
Yeah.
Which actually, there's my question for Scott.
What's that?
How does that play into the games like that? I mean, does that consistently work out where you have that big emotional game for a school like Iowa State had on Saturday?
I don't think it works out enough to base a number of plays on it. Now, you guys are close to what was going on. Travis, obviously close to what's going on in Ames, Iowa. So maybe you can get a better feel of how much importance you should put into that. And Travis felt like there was a good deal of importance there. And you see it once in a while in college. You don't see it in the NFL, but you see it once in a while in college football where there's enough of that going on to where everybody's jacked, but the team's not too jacked up to lose, sight of what they need to do on the field. And, like I'm not a big revenge guy. We talked about that last week that, just take care of business because after a few plays, the revenge motivation is over with. I just wanted to, something I thought about, Rob, after we did last week's show and I asked you that question and you answered with what I was hoping to hear. I thought, maybe it doesn't matter after 2 or 3 plays on the field, but maybe it matters during prep that week. It's a big emotional week or a big revenge game. Hey, man, not only did they beat us last year by 21, but they were up by, 14 with 38 seconds to go, and they did a Penn State, and they faked a knee on the last play, and they threw a touchdown pass. I'm thinking maybe during the week, the human nature aspect comes in, and you're so motivated that you prepare even better than you would on a normal week. And, maybe I'm thinking too much, but that's what I was thinking after we did the show last week.
It's that preparation, that emotional input into the preps got to be there. If you're only putting it into the game, it doesn't work. But I mean, if you're emotionally vested in the prep, then it does. Then that does happen. I guess my follow-up question about this Iowa State team then would be, do they have a letdown this week?
That's a fair question. As Scott said, they were outgained by TCU. If it wasn't for the turnovers, they may not have even won the game. I don't know if I'd call it a letdown. I was watching the CBS Sportsnet college football show this morning about 4:30 in the morning. That's one with Rick Neuheisel and those guys. They all took Iowa State. They were like, oh, they're big on Iowa State. And I'm like, I get it.
For the Cincinnati game?
For the Cincinnati game. And I'm like, I get it. And Brecht had a better game last week, but I'm still not sold on the offense, right? It's still, you got to put some consistent numbers together before you become a believer. It just can't be a one-game thing. I love Matt Campbell as a coach. I think he's a really good football coach, and he's done amazing things at Iowa State. I mean, he's won over 50%, I believe, of his conference games, something no Iowa State coach I don't think has ever done for like an eternity. I don't even know if Earl Bruce or did that when he was at Iowa State. So I don't know if I'd call it a letdown, Rob. They're just not, they're kind of like Iowa. Those two teams are very similar this year. I mean,
but you can count on Iowa, though.
Yeah, you can count on Iowa to suck on offense. Their defense has been somewhat suspect this year, but gets the job done. An interesting game that we're going to see on Saturday is a Pac-12 matchup. 2 undefeateds. You have Oregon against Washington. Good friend of mine, Troy Dannon, was just named the athletic director at Washington earlier this week. And, he left Tulane like at one day. I've never seen that before. He was named athletic director on like Sunday, and he was in Seattle on Tuesday, and he's going to be hosting this first big game on Saturday. This is a hell of a game. And, Scott, you've been all over Washington all year long.
Yeah, I'm going to say something real quick about that Iowa State thing. There's a guy named Jim Barnes. He's well into his 80s, and in fact, he lives in Iowa. And I'm going to reach out to him. I haven't talked to him in 15 years. And what he did is he had this way in college football of taking unexpected happenings out of the game, like, a plus 4 turnover ratio for Iowa State, and then factoring the score without the turnovers. And I'll bet, TCU wins that game by a couple of points without those turnovers in his model. I'll get that for next week. It's a really cool, interesting thing that he used to do. But
cool.
As far as Oregon at Washington laying 3, total of 67. I like both of these teams. You guys know how high I am on Washington and my futures ticket is rooting for Washington this week with that national championship ticket in my pocket. The Ducks have yet to face a halfway decent defense, and Washington's defensive numbers are certainly not elite, but they own the best defensive roster and athletes and speed that Oregon and Bo Nix will have faced so far this year. I might be a bit of a contrarian here. I'm going to talk about the total. Oregon faced Stanford, 130th against the pass, 123rd in total yards allowed. Colorado, 130th in total yards allowed, 129th against the pass, 98th against the run. Hawaii, horrible against the run. Portland State doesn't even factor into this level of play. And Texas Tech, 98th against the pass. So that's what Bo Nix, and he's a dink and dunk passer, and that's not a shot against him. That's just what he does. That's what he's faced thus far. And again, Washington is not a great defensive team, but they're much better, much more athletic than those teams that Nix and Oregon have faced thus far. On the flip side, you got Oregon, who's 5th against the pass, 6th in total yards allowed per game, excellent at stopping the run. And Washington is great through the air, not a great running team. Michael Penix might win the Heisman, or Bo Nix could too, but they don't run the football, does Washington. And I think Oregon will be able to slow Washington enough to help keep this game under 67. And I know a lot of guys who think this number should be 71, should be 70.5 in that neighborhood. I just think we're going to see two teams battle it out. I'm not saying this is a 14-10 game, but this looks like a game that could be, let's say 31-27 in that neighborhood. And I think it stays under that 67. Now you can, text me and rip me apart if the final score is, 63-56. But I just look at what these teams have done defensively, who they've driven all those yards against Oregon, who they've scored against. And I'm like, man, they haven't faced anybody yet. So it's going to be a great game to watch, but under 67 and a lean towards Washington.
Rob, you've played there. I mean, that place gets loud. It gets really, and this might be one of the biggest games Washington has hosted in some time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough place to play, and Washington always plays really well at home. So I don't know. Some of these Pac-12 rivalries, I think they're a little bit underrated. And if you talk about an emotional aspect, this might be, well, you got US. When do these guys play USC, or do they both play USC this year?
Scott, I don't know if you got the schedules by you or not. You usually more prepared.
2 seconds. It'll take me
Do
2 seconds.
we have Owen researching for us? We need Owen.
He's probably sleeping. He's waiting for a phone call to come in, which, by the way, you can call in at 402-543-5556.
I mean, from an emotional standpoint, this is one of those games where I think that plays into it. But I mean, it is always a tough place to play. I thought we went up there. I mean, okay, ancient history, I get it. We went up there in 92. They've got that overhang.
It's like a hanger, right? I mean, it
is, and I mean, I think they still do it. I don't think they're supposed to. They rebroadcast the crowd noise over the PA system. It's a little bit. It's kind of a sneaky bastard technique, but it works. And apparently, there's not an NC2A rule against it. So, I mean, with the NC2A, music and the band is supposed to stop, I think, when the offense breaks the huddle.
Crowd noise.
Apparently, crowd noise, there's like free reign on it. So,
by the way, USC's got it the toughest because they are at Washington. Excuse me, they're home against Washington on November 4th, and then they're at Oregon on November 11th.
Wow,
that's a tough back-to-backer for the Trojans. So
wow,
which all of a sudden they look. I mean, after that Colorado game and then this past weekend, they look kind of mildly human.
Yeah, the defense
they do.
Especially.
Well,
even Caleb Williams,
Well, we'll see what happens this weekend because SC goes to Notre Dame, 6:30 game on NBC. Notre Dame, a 2.5-point favorite at home. The over-under on this 60.5.
Lincoln Riley started to take that flack that he took at Oklahoma, that he doesn't pay attention on the defensive side of the football. We saw it in the second half against Colorado. Listen, Caleb Williams didn't play too hot in that game against Arizona. I mean, they were lucky to win that game by 2 points in overtime. And, I was disappointed in the Arizona head coach because you've just tied the game up at the end of regulation, or a chance to tie it up, I should say, with an extra point. And you're taking on one of the top teams in the country, one of them that is, a lot of people think has a chance to win the national title or at least reach the playoffs. So when you pull within one in the closing seconds of the game, go for two. Do you really think you're going to match up that well in overtime? And the metrics say that you have a better chance of winning the game by going for two at the end of regulation than by trying to repeat a couple of scoring drives when it gets to overtime. And that particular coach, didn't even know that after a certain amount of overtime periods or whatever they call it, you have to go for two. He found out from the referee he was sending his extra point unit out there. So I thought that was a bad call. He should have gone for two. Not saying he would have won the game and completed the 2-pointer, but the metrics say to do that. You got to know the metrics in this business as far as I'm concerned. But two reasons that I played against Dame last week and played Louisville. One, no one is going to sweep a 4-week-in-a-row schedule of Ohio State, Duke, Louisville, and USC with the two middle games coming on the road. That's asking a lot. What is Michigan doing? They're playing, Iowa, Podunk State, and, just like as Georgia is all season long.
Why do you got to pick on Iowa? Iowa, Podunk State, man.
I got nothing against Iowa, but I had to throw that in there for you, man. But I got family that went to Des Moines, what's it called? Des Moines West or West Valley or whatever.
Or West Des Moines Valley.
Valley High, West Des Moines.
Yeah. I got cousins that went there, so there.
Where my mom went.
Your mom's a Valley grad?
Well, she moved before the start of her senior year back to Burlington.
Okay.
Who are the Tigers?
Yeah,
that was Valley High.
Okay, that's where my cousins went.
Those Tigers.
Okay.
Wow. Learn
big
something about
rivals
you guys every
with
day.
Urbandale.
So anyway, you look
We
at that
digress.
4-game set, guys. Look at that 4-game set, and who's going to beat those teams? Ohio State, Duke, Louisville, and USC 4 games in a row. I thought Notre Dame was going to be gassed. They looked gassed against the Louisville Cardinals. I don't know that they gained that energy back. I mean, and also something a lot of people don't talk about, Notre Dame lost 3 assistant coaches from last year, and they were 3 really good assistant coaches. And we've seen this coaching unit struggle. We've talked about it more than we probably should have, especially what happened against Ohio State. They're good against the pass. They're not so good against the run. Caleb Williams had a really bad game last week, still managed to get the win. But even saying about that against Arizona, still a 71% passer. And how about this? 22 touchdown passes, 1 interception in 166 attempts on the season. Marshawn Lloyd runs for more than 500 yards so far on the season, almost 8 yards per carry. I mean, this guy's like Mike Rozier-like, from the 80s, I should say. So I think USC is going to get him here. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but I do think they'll win by 7 to 10 points. I think the Irish are just going to be a little bit out of gas, especially after losing last week.
Wow, I tell you what, Notre Dame loses at home. Freeman's going to be under some pressure, right? I mean, he's going to be under some pressure. I mean, that's a hot seat. Any coach who coaches at Notre Dame is on the hot seat the minute they take the job.
I keep saying, looking for the school. Deion Sanders is not that far to the west. Bring that bundle of cash, offer it to him.
Wow. Could you imagine Deion at Notre Dame?
No, I can't. No.
I would love it.
That's never going to happen. You know that, right?
Why not?
No, it's just not. It won't happen. 402-543-5556. Nebraska has a bye week. If you want to know more on Rob's thoughts on the bye, go ahead and go to the YouTube channel. Make sure you're watching on YouTube right now, I hope. Subscribe to the channel. But if you go down to the podcast, Rob has a lot of good thoughts on the bye week for Nebraska. They'll be back in action again next week. The battle for the Big Ten West may be taking place in Madison, Wisconsin this weekend. It is the Iowa Hawkeyes taking on the Wisconsin Badgers. This one blows me away. You ready for this, folks? Wisconsin's a 10-point favorite, and your total is 34.5. 34.5.
I'm looking at the over-under there with that total, and I'm just like, this is the most Big Ten West over-under ever.
God.
Absolutely true. I got to ask Rob a question real quick before we jump into this, if you guys don't mind. And it's I remember, of course, the name like Darlington and Tenneper and those guys. Who was your coach up front on the offensive line?
Tenneper and Dan Young.
Okay, that's what I thought. And I was going to say, what would Milt Tenneper or Tom Osborne have done if you would have done a Shadur Sanders and run over to the opposing crowd and start flashing your watch? And who plays with a watch on?
I'm still trying. I don't get the watch thing. I don't understand it. I mean, I get the whole. Taunting thing, I understand that. I know there's specific taunts. The watch thing I don't get, but now you'd be on the bench.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's a different time. I get it. I'm not a Shadur Sanders hater. I like the kid.
Hey, Dion. I mean, I remember Dion back in that time period. I mean, look at there's a good comment right there.
Dion at Clemson would be pretty scary.
Well, I think that's kind of an interesting thing because I think sort of the concept that I've had in my mind is that Dion makes some waves at Colorado for a few years, and then he's going to end up at an SEC or one of the, I guess I call it the Southern ACC schools, and gets there. And I think that's where he really makes some noise, which I say ACC schools, future Big Ten and SEC schools.
It's a good point. Here's what's going to happen. Brian Kelly's going to be a disaster at LSU, and he'll take the LSU job. How's that?
I mean, do you really think he's going to be a disaster there?
Because I don't like the guy. I just don't like him.
I don't think he's been horrible there thus far. You've got a two-year window here.
I think they're underperforming this year. They're underperforming. They've already lost twice. That's underperforming. They lost at Florida at Florida State. Then they got beat at Ole Miss. That Ole Miss loss was a bad loss.
That defense is bad.
Yeah, I mean, is LSU? Well, let me ask you this: is Ole Miss that bad? I mean, they.
Defensively, they're horrible. Offensively, they're good. I mean, the Lane Train's got it going. What is he, 5-1, I think, maybe 6-1? But LSU should have won that game. To me, LSU's already underperforming this year. But that's my opinion. And I never liked him at Notre Dame. Didn't really care for him at Cincinnati. I
don't know if anybody likes Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
It's crazy because, man, when he was at Cincinnati, he was like, he was the flavor of the month, the flavor of the year, decade, whatever you want to call it.
It's such a great D coordinator at Cincinnati.
Yeah. And you know what? Now that he goes to like LSU and we see.
I see what you did there. I saw
that. He goes. We were going to let that ride right by, but he was like last week. I mean, he tells that stupid Columbia jacket joke. I mean, it's just like, dude, just give a press conference, get out of there. And everybody had this blank look on their face because nobody got it, which I don't blame anybody for not getting it.
Yeah, his persona needs to be almost kind of like the Nick Saban-esque kind of guy. Like, hey, I'm not going to crack jokes. I'm not going to try and connect with you as a person. I'm the damn coach. I'm going to say coach speaks stuff, and I'm going to call it good. And honestly, most people are fine with that.
Yeah.
I think the thing that probably does bug people about Brian Kelly is the fact that is who he is at heart, but he tries to come off with, hey, I'm going to try and connect with you with this, I don't know what, rustic Louisiana homespun, I don't know what, and it just doesn't fly.
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy from the Northeast. In his first day, he goes to a basketball game at LSU and turns on the Southern accent, and people are like, "Oh, you're Hillary Clinton." Let's dive back into the game we were going to talk about. It's the Big Ten West matchup. Winner will be in the driver's seat for the West Division. Not that that's saying much, but it's Iowa at Wisconsin. The Badgers a 10-point favorite. Again, the over/under at 34.5.
Well, I'm going to tell you why this number's – I mean, you can find 9.5. If you like Iowa, you take no less than 10. There's plenty of 10s. If you like Wisconsin, you lay 9.5 because there's plenty of 9.5s out there. The total 34.5 just about everywhere. But my power rating, I checked with another guy who I trust more than anybody else I know with his power ratings earlier today. We both make Wisconsin 8.5 points better than Iowa on a neutral field. So you factor in the home field advantage, and all of a sudden you're talking about a double-digit point spread and potential win if the Badgers play up to their capability. Longo's passing attack, he came to Wisconsin, and I still think it's a great hire. I was never that big on Mordecai when he was at SMU. So I was like, is this really going to work? They're changing their identity, and they've got a quarterback who's good, but I don't think as good as everybody hyped him up to be in Mordecai. And we haven't seen a great deal of what they had hoped for at all, really, with this passing game thus far. They need a different quarterback in there next year. They're strong on the ground, though, man. They can run, and they're third in rush success rate, so they stay ahead of the chains. We talked about that metric a week or two ago, that they're getting those 5 yards on first down and so on. The Hawkeyes defense can hang, I think, for a while. They are legit. There's nothing fake about this Iowa defense. I believe they're legit, no doubt about it. Top 10 and a lot of metrics that I use, but that horrible Hawkeye offense, backup quarterback, although there's not that big of a difference between, backup and starter there. But I think it's going to be maybe not like Penn State and that Iowa has such few plays and has such a short time of possession, but I just think they just wear thin this defense as the game goes on. In theory, the books are saying with that line and that total 24-10, I say if you want Wisconsin, lay the 9.5 because it's probably going to be in that 24 to 27 to 10 neighborhood. I think they'll win by 14 to 17 points.
Wow, boy! I all I know is this: the Collins show on the radio station I work for is going to be busy if that ends up being the case. You got time for some questions, Scott? Got a couple coming into the chat. Brian says, "Hey, BYU is a 6-point dog to TCU, who's missing their starting quarterback. How is this possible?"
Always remember that if there's a starting quarterback who's missing, it's been baked into the number because the books know all that already. So the line is a little bit bigger than the power rating would actually be at this particular site. As far as I'm concerned, I am passing this game. I would like to come in a little bit on TCU, but I keep looking at that defense and how bad it is. And then I see what they did last week, just mistakes, and they were overvalued and overrated right from the start this season. So it's a good question. But again, as always, remember when a quarterback is out or a point guard who's strong in the NBA or college baskets is out, it's all baked into the number before you even get a chance to take your shot, plunking your money down on that game.
Steven asks, got a question for Scott. Is there any statistical advantage to a certain bye week scheduling, i.e. week 5, week 8, or week 10?
More in the NFL than anything else. The NFL bye week certainly means a lot, and you'll see different bye weeks coming into play as far as, over the course of time, a decade. NFL teams with maybe a bye week in week 8 or earlier has a different spread record than they do week 8 or after. For college football, it's always been odd to me to have like a week 9 bye week or a week 10 bye week because you're so ingrained in your season that, first of all, if you're bad enough to where you need a bye week to turn things around, you're bad enough to need a bye week to turn things around. And if you're playing well, you just interrupted your schedule. Maybe Michigan against Ohio State can use that extra bye week. Same with Ohio State against Michigan, those big games like that to help you prep. But those conference teams late in the year know each other so well inside and out when those coaches have been there for a few years that it just bothers me when a bye week hits that late in college football. I don't have an exact number as to when you should have your bye week as far as the spread is concerned, but I'll tell you this much. In the NFL, there are certain times when that bye week comes into play and it's league-wide. It's almost like human nature and goes back a decade.
Tell you what, take a look at the BetFred Pro Football Bonus. Place a game day wager on any pro football first touchdown score, and you'll get paid out 2 times the odds in cash if your bet wins and the player scores a second touchdown. Please use the promo code SCORE. How about the parlay bonus? When you place 9 football parlays, the 10th parlay is on Fred. Get rewarded with up to a $100 Fred bet each week of the pro football season. Use the promo code parlay. BetFred is active in 11 states. Go to BetFredSports.com to find out which state you can bet in. If you're in eastern Nebraska, just drive over to Iowa, download the BetFred Sports Iowa app. Remember, terms and conditions do apply. You got to be 21 plus, located in the state of Iowa when you do place that wager. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-BET-SOFT. If you like what you heard from Scott Spreitzer tonight, and this is a younger-looking Scott Spreitzer on your screen right now, because I try to make him look younger. Text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 and get a free $60 trial of the premium member picks from Scott, or visit DocSports.com and sign up for the free 60 on the upper left-hand side of the website. Guys, always a pleasure. Appreciate the time, and let's do it again next week. What do you say?
Absolutely. Go Badgers.
Oh, now, why do you got to be like that? Why do you have to be like that? See, that's what he does. He picks on me. Scott, thanks for your time, and we'll see you next week, buddy.
Hey, I love you, Travis, but I got to say go Bearcats. So,
man, everybody's picking on me tonight. Well, thanks for watching the Behind the Point Spread show presented by BetFred Sports.